In the 80s, I was involved in 82 during the first farm crisis. Farmers were really hurting terribly, and there was a group of farmers that wanted to build their own production plant, and they were called MCP, Minnesota Corn Processors, and they wanted to build it in Marshall, Minnesota, and they decided they wanted to build a wet mill, would manufacture corn syrup and corn starch. And then in 1988, we added on a dry grind ethanol plant for them. We built the entire plant for them at MCP, their wet mill, and then we added ethanol in 1988, and that was a Vogelbusch process, and we did the balance of plant design around it, and it worked quite well. And this was a 5,500 member ownership co-op that owned the facility, all farmer owned. So that's what got me excited. The farmers were creating a market for themselves instead of taking their corn to an elevator and be shipped off down the Mississippi River, or just taking whatever the market was paying. This gave them a chance to be the middleman. After building the FCP plant, then we started building plants for new cooperatives. The plants were built in small communities, usually located around small communities. It brought business to their areas and a market for their products. It helped. A lot of small communities are suffering from a lack of business and fewer people in the area, and this gave them another life. Just like in our hometown of Granite Falls, our Napa store was going to close until we built the ethanol plant. After we built the ethanol plant, a true story, they thought, oh, maybe we should keep it open. Maybe there's going to be a life for us. And they're still open today, many, many, many years later. It creates a lot of business, creates a tire business, creates oil and gas, and it creates all kinds of business for small communities that are lucky enough to be close to an ethanol plant. They get to be a great customer themselves to the community. From 2001 to 2007, it was a complete blur. Our company, Fagen Inc., built about 110 to 120 plants. We built Vogelbusch plants, we built Broying plants, and the majority of our plants were ICM process. We built the ICM process around our plants. And at the peak, we were in the ground building 45 at the same time. And we got them all done in time, but we were cruising. And then the industry come to a pretty fast screeching halt at that time, far as any new plants. But all the plants that we built survived, and they're all making money, and it's a great success story for the farmer owner plants. There are some privately owned plants too, but majority of them are owned by farmers of local communities and local counties. Back to 82, when the Minnesota Corn Processors put their large co-op together, and then the ethanol industry was going to be a business of its own, and not necessarily, they weren't going to be wet mills, they're going to be dry grind facilities. And Minnesota, of course, started with a 10% producer payment. So a 10 million gallon ethanol plant, that was the first plants to be built. Even MCP's first one was a 10 million gallon ethanol plant. The state of Minnesota would give them a 10% producer payment for every gallon they made, and that penciled out. They could survive that way. So there's a lot of interest in farmers in different areas that wanted to be part of this, and so we were probably one of the only people building ethanol plants at that time. A lot more people got joined in on it, of course, but we would go visit with them. A couple things I want to say is that Minnesota had a 10 million gallon ethanol plant, and with a producer payment, a 10 million gallon ethanol plant could survive and make money, fairly decent return. In Iowa, they didn't have a producer payment available. They never could get one passed, but the farmers down in Iowa really wanted to have ethanol plants, and so did Nebraska and other states like that. We did the math and figured, well, they could raise enough equity to build a 40 million gallon plant. With economy of scale, they can make the same amount of profit as a Minnesota 10 million gallon plant and be in the ethanol industry. And it sold like hotcakes. A 40 million gallon size really worked well, and we sold them like hotcakes. At our company, we decided we had to have just not build a plant where anybody wanted one. We decided, I had Steve Core with me, great guy. Everybody knows Steve, and we decided that we were going to have stuff to make this stuff all work and not have a bunch of failures, we wanted to work with the farmers. Typically, farmers would come from 30 miles in an area and get together, and they'd get a board member from this town or this township or wherever, and they would all want to build that ethanol plant, see it be built in their own community. And so we started right away by saying, we are going to pick the best community, the best profitable location for your plant. We're going to take all the information you guys can throw in the area you'd like to be built, have your plant built. We are going to help you locate your plant in the most profitable community or location. The rail, the natural gas, the corn area, everything. So we help the farmer boards pick the right location for their plant. And that was very important to us to be able to help them, because we got pretty doggone good at it. And Steve Corr put a good group together, and we really got good at this, picking the right locations. And then, of course, the farmers board had to sign off on it and agree. Sometimes there would be some arguing back and forth amongst board members, but they usually listened, and it worked good. Because also our company at Fagen Inc., we would help the farmers put their equity drive on. We would be right in the middle of the equity drives, helping them sell their stock to local farmers to invest in their plant. Just like David Kroll's, we've got to be very good at that. He helped a lot of plants raise equity. So we helped them raise equity. We made the contacts with the banks. We helped bring in the banks, do presentations to them to see if they were a good fit for this local group of farmers. Typically, the banks would like to see the farmers raise 40% equity, and then they would finance 60%, and then eventually it got to be 50% equity, 50% debt. So we stayed with the farmers until it was done, until it was built, until it was running, and trained their employees along with our process vendors, ICM at this time, and we'd get the plant up and running, train their employees, and turn them loose. And it didn't take very long to build a few of these ethanol plants, and all of a sudden their experienced ethanol people did exist. They already had a job. So basically all these ethanol plants that got built, we hired people off the street, the local people, to work in these plants. We trained them, helped the owners train them so they could run their facilities, and then they try to find good management staff to come in, general managers and plant managers to run these facilities. And believe it or not, the ethanol industry started out with and over the years just started with greenhorns, and everybody just got trained in themselves and got trained. And one thing that we stuck with, which was good, is we built, good grief, Vogelbush, we built brewing plants, we did build any Delta T, we finished a couple Delta T plants, and so we built in different design process designers. Had a deal with ICM, Dave and Dennis Vandergren, for their process, and we stuck with the same process designers, so the plants were all identical. And all farmer groups, they would like say, well, we want this in our plant, or we want that in our plant. And we got to a point where it said, nope, we got a mousetrap that works, guys. You can change the plant after we're done. But with this, what you're gonna get, just like buying a black Ford only had a black Model T available, we only had a certain process available and a certain sizes available. Everybody had to take the same plant. If they wanted to change them later, great. There was such a demand for ethanol, we had to build these things fast. As I said, at one point at our peak, we were building 45 plants at the same time. We got them all done in time, by the way. But so it was a fast build out in this industry. It didn't last very long, but it got to a point where we took care of the market. And now the plant's been expanding on their own, of course, and increasing their volume. And so all of the employees were locally homegrown to run these facilities. I'll tell you what I was most proud of is because I saw the farmers firsthand in '82 really struggling to survive, to be in the ag business, into the farm business. And this new industry gave them a chance to be a manufacturer of their own products. It gave them a chance to own their own ethanol plants, manufacture ethanol and distiller grain and corn oil, and their dividend check as an owner for the ethanol facility would come back to them if they have a successful year. And and it works. It took the corn from being $1.85 a bushel forever. That was the price before the industry started. I think it was about $1.85. David could probably tell you different or whatever. And all of a sudden, we grew a demand for this corn, and we're manufacturing a couple different products, and it was a win-win, and it was fun to see the farmers. They were hauling their corn to the ethanol plants with their triple boxes and behind their tractors to the ethanol plant when it first started. It didn't take very many years, and they all owned their own semis and pulling into the plant with their own semis as they grew their operations. And that was fun to see the farmers grow and actually capable of making a decent profit and a decent living so they could stay on the farms. That was my most exciting thing to see, is the wealth that it created out in the middle of the Midwest. It made a big difference, and people that lived in the small communities could all benefit from being able to make a profit. They'd spend money. It was a big thing for the entire Midwest, and then of course it grew further than that. It got into Texas, it got into some other locations like that in Georgia. But it was a great thing to see the farmers have another tool to help them become successful.